Get ready, Staten Island.
The Ferry Hawks are back at SIUH Community Park July 7th to the 12th for a 6-game series against the High Point Rockers. Tonight, first pitch is at 6:30. It's Thirsty Thursday with $5 Bud and Bud Light drafts. Friday, July 10th, first pitch is at 7 p.m. May the Force be with you on Star Wars Night with post-game kids glow around the bases with special lightsaber training packs.
Visit ferryhawks.com now to lock in your seats.
And we're live on match day as Doug reaches for a buffalo wing. He's got it! Oh, and he's gone for a can of Pepsi too! What a finish! There's no doubt about it. It just tastes better. Match days deserve Pepsi.
The Roger Stone Show on the Red Apple Podcast Network.
Welcome back. You're in the Stone Zone right here at the Roger Stone Show. Joining me now is one of the smartest guys I know, Rod D. Martin. He's the founder and CEO of Martin Capital, but more importantly, he's a technology entrepreneur, an investor, a futurist, a geopolitical sage, literally one of the smartest guys I know. When I want to formulate my own opinions, I go to his website, which is rodmartin.org, or you can find him on Substack, and or catch one of his incredible interviews. I often formulate my views based on his sage analysis. Rod, thanks for joining us today on the Roger Stone Show.
Hey, it's great to be here. Thank you.
So I guess I want to start. I saw a great interview with you regarding the war in Iran. It seems to me that Donald Trump has given peace a chance, but as many, I think, have correctly said, you can't reach agreement with people whose word is no good, and who will never stop in their efforts to destroy our country and our civilization and to impose their will on others. The question now, of course, is, having gone the extra mile to try to bring peace and having had those agreements cobbled out by Vice President J.D. Vance, as well as his other negotiators, violated by the Iranians, what happens next?
Well, you know better than anybody that Donald Trump is always finding more than one way to win, and he's always doing several things at once with every chess move, and that was certainly the case here. The single most important thing we did was not showing the world that we really were willing to negotiate. The most important thing was that we used the negotiations to get the different factions in Iran fighting each other. And there have been multiple high-level assassinations of senior people for reasons of, a car wreck here or some accident over there. And it's just obvious what's happening. And it's going back and forth primarily between the faction of the mullahs who control the assembly of experts that picks the next Ayatollah versus the IRGC, which has become something of a power unto itself. The more these guys kill each other, the better it is for us and Iran and the world. And every time Donald Trump has pronounced some peace initiative, some breakthrough, some kind of deal, he has pushed whichever faction that most annoys to be even more annoyed at the others. So it has really been a brilliant use of time during which we have surreptitiously but clearly gotten control of actual traffic through the Strait. Yes, Iran is harassing it. CENTCOM announced today how many ships are actually flowing freely through the Strait. We brought global oil prices down to roughly where they were on February 27th. Gas prices are on their way. And as you've seen, the president and the Republicans' poll numbers generally are moving back in the right direction. So he's accomplishing many things at once. But at the end of the day, these people are an existential threat to everyone they hate, which is basically everyone. And if they aren't disarmed, not just their nuclear program, but their ballistic missiles as well, they will eventually do something horrific that can't easily be come back from, and that's exactly what the president is preventing.
Yeah, there are some people who don't realize the historical record here, but Donald Trump has said since 1988 that there was no circumstance under which he would allow the Iranian regime to have nuclear weapons. So this is not some new position on his part, nor is it a departure from what he ran on. Look, he's an anti-interventionist. I don't think he likes endless foreign war when that endless foreign war has no obvious purpose, has no obvious goal. That's not the situation here. And look, I'm if I had to put myself in a wing of the party, I'm probably more in the Ron Paul wing of the party myself, but I'm also a realist. And if the intelligence indicated to the president that the Iranians were, as they said and boasted at the negotiation table, had enough enriched uranium to build either 7 or 11 bombs, and therefore he mounted Midnight Hammer and then Epic Fury, well, then I support the president. I also supported his effort to try to bring this conflict to a close, but it's clear that it takes two to tango. One of the things that I spoke about earlier this week, I saw that you also mentioned in your interview, of course, is the importance of Karg Island and the vulnerability of Karg Island. Karg Island is a small island through which 90% of Iran's energy output, that's oil, flows mostly to China. So far, the president has not directly hit Karg Island. In other words, he has not damaged the pipe infrastructure there that goes directly to their oil fields, hoping to save it for a post-regime Iran's prosperity. But he certainly could do that. And that would basically choke off the lifeblood, the economic lifeblood of the mullahs.
As military operations go, this would be as close to a cakewalk as you're going to get. The island is significantly offshore from Iran. It processes 90% of Iran's oil exports to the world, and it is not as well defended as one might think. The only strikes the president has authorized on Karg Island so far have been against those defensive positions. As you say, I'm convinced that the president not only wants but can envision and is hoping to bring to pass, a little bit beyond our ability to guarantee, but hoping to bring to pass a free Iran. And that being the case, they're going to need Karg Island. They're going to need their other infrastructure as intact as possible. And the president's conduct of this war has been almost exclusively against the IRGC, not even against the Artesh, which is the official national army of Iran, but the actual Iranian Revolutionary Guards Corps. So he has been extremely careful about this. We can take Karg Island. I think he would like to avoid it because there is the potential for collateral damage to the infrastructure. The bigger thing is it would actually be boots on the ground, and he doesn't want that. He isn't getting us into a forever war like Bush. He is ending one. The Iranians have been on the attack for 47 years. Donald Trump is bringing it to a close. He is going to win this conclusively, and I really don't doubt that one bit. The past several weeks of peace talks actually just reaffirm what I think is his commitment to seeing this to a successful conclusion, and successful will not make sense to the New York Times.
I completely and totally agree. Let me now turn to, you had some very sage comments about NATO. We had recently had a NATO meeting in Ankara, Turkey, where it appears that the president had to take the Spanish to the woodshed because of their unwillingness to pay their fair share for their defense. Now, I'm kind of a hardliner. I think that the NATO alliance has outlived its usefulness. It made sense to me after World War II when Europe was largely economically and physically devastated, but America was still relatively prosperous. But today, it seems to me to outlive its usefulness. First of all, our NATO allies, they don't seem to want to pay their fair share for their defense. And then secondarily, when we make a strategic decision such as our attack on Iran, they refuse to let us use their airspace. They refuse, in the case of Spain, for example, or they refuse to let us use our bases that we built in their countries, thinking of Italy. What is your take on this recent NATO meeting and where the NATO alliance is heading?
Well, I think you're absolutely right that if NATO had wound down in 1992, that would not have been the end of the world at all. In fact, and I'm pro-NATO. I think NATO can have utility. But if we had ended it at the end of the Cold War, where was the threat that would justify its ongoing existence? It just wasn't there. And NATO expansion has clearly been provocative to the Russians. I'm not saying that we're responsible for Russia invading its neighbors. That's certainly not true. But we certainly created an environment in which a Vladimir Putin could succeed our friend Boris Yeltsin. So all of this has been kind of needless. At the present, okay, we've decided we think it's valuable. Okay, we can continue with that, but not on the current terms. Elbridge Colby talks about a NATO 3.0, where 1.0 is during the Cold War, 2.0 is this mission creep nightmare that has existed since the end of the Cold War, and then 3.0 being a reversal back to its roots of actual active defense. And I have to hand it to Merz, who actually stood up in Ankara and said flat out in his capacity as Chancellor of Germany, the numbers are ridiculous. Donald Trump may be rude, but he's not wrong. America's paying about 80% of the bill. Europe's paying about 20%. He is right that that's unacceptable. It has always been unacceptable. So it's good to hear that out of Germany. I wish we could hear it out of London. I guess we just need to elect Nigel Farage, and we will. And the Spanish have to get their act together. There is absolutely no way we're going to subsidize that much longer if they don't.
Excellent analysis. I point out that in his first term, Donald Trump got our NATO allies to cough up $650 million in past due, let's call them dues for sake of a better discussion, for their own defense. And this has been an abusive relationship. I think the problem here is our NATO allies are not used to having an assertive American president who demands that they carry their own load. And it makes ending the conflict between Russia and Ukraine exceedingly difficult. I still think those who argue that this is about democracy, please, Zelensky has not had an election now in years, doesn't want an election because he knows he would lose an election. This is the meat grinder continues. The Russians seem to have endless capacity for war. No one is winning. The death tolls are unacceptable, yet this entire conflict winds on. The Ukrainians seem to have done some damage to the Russians in this past week alone. It is interesting that the situation in Iran seems to have been, I won't say a distraction, but there's less focus on the war between Russia and Ukraine. And I know that, of course, was the president's highest priority going into this second term. I'm still hopeful that he can find a way to end that. We've got about 2 minutes before we have to take a quick break. Rod, why don't you get a final thought in there? About a minute, actually.
I think the president has handled this brilliantly. He gets zero credit for it, but the truth is he's the one who took the gloves off and let Zelensky start hitting those deep Russian targets like Omsk, like St. Petersburg, like Moscow, which was absolutely necessary to get Putin to the table. I am really, really proud of how this administration has handled the war.
So much for those who are saying that Donald Trump is in the pocket of the Russians, a complete absurdity. I mean, look, I had members of my own family killed by Russian tanks in Budapest in 1956, but it doesn't stop people on the far left of saying that I'm a Russian apologist or some kind of Russian intelligence asset. Anyway, we have to take a quick break, and then we'll be back with more of Rod Martin. Go to rodmartin.org. You can see his brilliant interviews and some of the great stuff that he's written, and we'll be right back. And we're back in the Stone Zone. Joining me is Rod Martin, who is the author of the Rod Martin Report. You can go to rodmartin.org, or you can go to Substack. I strongly recommend that you subscribe. He is a brilliant analyst of the geopolitical scene, both domestically and internationally, and I'm always happy to have him on the show. Rod, I guess here's a little bit of a curveball. I continue to be shocked at the fact that Senator Mitch McConnell, who was evidently stricken some days ago, has not been seen or heard from. We have assurances from his staff that he is still with us, but it bothers me that a member of the Senate doesn't show himself or show some other evidence that he's really still alive. And then adding to this mystery is the fact that his wife, Elaine Chao, who's the longest-serving member of the Bush cabinet and also a long-serving member of the Trump cabinet in the first term as Secretary of Treasury, left immediately for China, where her family very undeniably has ties to some of those very high up in the Chinese Communist Party. Rod, what do you make of all this?
The McConnell thing feels a little bit like Yuri Andropov and Konstantin Chernenko. There's this sense of the Soviet leader is dead, but we're not going to tell you for a couple more weeks. I don't know what's happened to Mitch McConnell, but the only people who have claimed to speak to him are not entirely credible on that point. So that's disturbing, but, it'll resolve one way or another. The real question is Elaine Chao going to China in the middle of her husband being in this state? That's actually kind of weird and disturbing, and I think you're right to call it out. I don't know why she's there, but I would hope that my wife would not be in China when I'm on my deathbed. That's just really strange.
It does kind of have a Weekend with Bernie feel to it. And now, of course, I hate to see this, but with the sudden and kind of shocking death of Senator Lindsey Graham, who I agreed with on some things and disagreed with others, there's no evidence of foul play. There's no evidence that he was assassinated by the take your pick, by the Russians or by the Iranians or any other evidence of foul play. The FBI Director, Kash Patel, has announced that they will conduct an investigation to ensure that is the case, but it appears to me that the senator died of what was probably a heart attack or some other heart-related ailment. Look, he was worked very hard. He constantly ate fast food. He had just done a 20-hour flight from Ukraine, but it just seems we saw this, and I saw you commenting on it before in the Charlie Kirk case. People jump to these extraordinary conclusions. I guess those are the people they call conspiracy theorists, but neither in the case of Lindsey Graham nor in the case of Senator Mitch McConnell does there appear to be foul play. Different processes to fill both of those seats. It is unfortunate that in the case of Lindsey Graham, because he had been renominated in the primary but he had not been reelected, there will be a special election. On the other hand, I think you agree with me, at this point the state is reliably red, and it will produce a Republican senator. Meantime, the current outgoing governor, Henry McMaster, good man, known him since he was the U.S. attorney under Ronald Reagan, gets to appoint a successor who may or may not be the candidate who runs in a special election. I want to thank my guest, Rod Martin, and tell you one more time, go to rodmartin.org, or go to his Substack. He is literally one of the smartest guys I know, and we're honored to have him with us today. Rod, thanks for joining us.
Thanks for listening to The Roger Stone Show. You can hear The Roger Stone Show Sunday afternoons at 3. If you like the podcast, share it with your friends and listen anytime at WABCRadio.com and download the WABC Radio app. Hit that subscribe button on all major podcast platforms. Plus, follow WABC on social on Instagram, TikTok, Facebook, and X. See you next time for a new episode so you never have to wonder.
What the heck is going on here?
My fellow Americans, if you think you know politics, think again. I'm Michael Cohen, and every week on When You Know, we're pulling back the curtain on power, politics, media, and the people making headlines. On my new WABC radio show, you'll hear conversations from names that you know. People like Jerry Falwell Jr., Anthony Scaramucci, Alan Dershowitz, and many, many more. Maybe, just maybe, we'll even hear from the president. No scripts, no spin, just real conversations with people who were in the room where it happened. And trust me, we've got some very big surprises coming. Look, I've spent years at the center of politics, controversy, and power. I know the players, I know the stories, and now I'm bringing you inside. When You Know, Sundays at 5 p.m. on WABC Radio. And When You Know Unleashed, wherever you get your podcasts. Because with me, you never know who's going to show up.